welcome to this episode of Star Wars Universe Podcast. Today we're continuing our During the Strike coverage where we're looking at things other than just Star Wars on screen. And today we're talking about one of the favorite concepts within fandom, the Glup Shitto. Yes, we're talking about everyone's favorite characters, the ones that aren't, the big credits, that aren't necessarily the protagonists or antagonists of an episode, but they just show up every now and then, and they make some certain people super happy. What is a Glup Shitto? What does it mean? Who are they? How do you define it? All that stuff we're going to talk about with Glup Shitto expert extraordinaires, Riki and Sarah Hayashi. All that and more after a commercial break. Wait, no. I was going to say all that and more after a commercial break, but as you probably noticed, we've changed where the commercials are happening. Now they're happening at the beginning and the end of the episode, so we're just going to dive right into the episode. So, Riki, well, first of all, I should say Sarah, so glad to have you back.
Yay.
Thank you. Yes, sorry, I've had a chaotic summer. But good thing grad school is starting up again in a week. That'll make everything chill and easy again, right? Right?
Huzzah. No, I hear that. And, I know that right now we're kind of looking at different ways to do content. I hope we're going to keep giving you episodes week to week. I mean, more than anything, I hope the strike ends because there is some new content coming out that I would love to be able to cover. I'm going to continue to not do any coverage of things until the strike ends, but we're going to just, keep finding things to talk about each week. And so, we'll see. It'll often be Riki or Sarah. There's some other great people we're going to be talking to. Just last week, you probably all heard an episode with friendly neighborhood master Alan, who creates lightsabers and talking about lightsabers. So we've got a lot of great topics to talk about. We also do have some listener feedback, some stuff that I've been holding for when Sarah and Riki are back, and we'll do that at the end of this episode, before the Patreon content, though. But let's just kind of dive right in. And let me start by asking Riki, because you're the one who brought this up. What is a Glup Shitto?
Okay, hang on. Yeah.
He's got notes.
Well, I pulled up the quote. So the origins of Glup Shitto, there was a Tumblr post on September 3rd, 2020. So this concept is only almost 3 years old. And this was by a user on Tumblr named Gom Jabbar, which itself is a reference to Dune. Mm-hmm. And Gom Jabbar wrote, quote, "Every time a new Star Wars movie or show is announced, all the fans are like, OMG, Glup Shitto is back." And that's it. Well, followed by a series of crying emojis.
Right.
And that's the origin. And it just kind of hit in the right moment in fandom and caught on and has become truly a phenomenon that goes beyond Star Wars, I've discovered. Really, it has gone into the public conscience of a lot of geekdom. Star Wars fans, of course, I think, embrace Glup Shitto fully for its ridiculousness. But yeah, it's just this concept of kind of people love obscure characters, I think, is how I would sum it up.
Yeah, the background character whose name from the toy that was released in a set of toys or something like that, or the weird magazine article you read about them, and they're back in the latest TV show. I think Marvel has a bunch of them.
Or you watch a terrible holiday special on TV, sure, and they have a real cool looking bounty hunter in it.
Yes.
I don't think Boba Fett counts as a Glup Shitto.
But look at the origin.
But the origin. Sure,
arguably, he's the original.
That is the topic we'll discuss, is what happens when a Glup Shitto becomes super popular. Do they stay a Glup Shitto? So we'll definitely discuss that. Let's just stick on this definition, though, because it's a really interesting concept, this idea of, the background character who just people totally fall in love with, they really want to see more of. And as you said, it's that moment, not only of, that we saw them once, but then when you see them again in something like that, and you get so excited, oh my God, will this character come back? Will this character be on screen? Why do you think it is that that it did take off specifically in Star Wars?
Because Star Wars has a ridiculous number of characters with names, and my theory on this is that George Lucas was trying to toyify Star Wars, right? The whole action figure line. So he just said, yeah, this character in the background, name, and like gave everyone a name so that if he needed to sell an action figure, like they were ready to go.
Important note for those who don't know this, part of George Lucas's deal when he signed with the company that produced the original Star Wars movies is he said, I want all the profits from the market, from the toys. And people thought he was nuts because no one had really thought about that. And that's brilliant. Those toys probably paid for like 70% of Lucasfilms by the end of the day.
If you take nothing else from this, like the brilliance of him as a business person in that moment to like make that decision and have faith in his own property to do that, I think is important. And like everything, like I remember when I was a kid, Return of the Jedi like had the most of these because you have Jabba's palace and every character in the background of Jabba's palace had an action figure.
Yep. And all of them had like a little paragraph biography of on the back, and it said like, Max Rebo, the keyboardist and, the guitar, he's the, inventor of the style of music that we're not going to mention on here. Like they all had that. I remembered I had the Greedo one, which someone else mentioned was their Glup Shitto, and I just loved it. Or like
Greedo's great.
I think a great example of this coming back, the IG-94 droid. I think I'm probably getting
IG-88?
IG-88. Yeah, it's just a droid that just stands there. It doesn't even have a line in Empire Strikes Back. But
all those bounty hunters.
And then it shows up again as a major character in Mandalorian, and people went nuts.
Well, and like Bosk too, right? Like we get Bosk in Clone Wars a little bit. Yeah.
Dan, Bosk, Dengar, IG-88, and Forlom. And I know these because I'm a Star Wars fan, but there's like a great Boba Fett comic book series where a lot of them are featured antagonists.
And that's something I wanted to bring up is I think one of the reasons why I think you're very right that Star Wars is so perfect for it because every character has a name. But also I think it's because, and especially like for now, this was true in the Legends canon as well, but especially I think more recently, Legends often would invent all these new characters, and they were fun too. But a lot of the Disney stuff has been, let's take these people who are named and give you all of their stories, and just take them in new directions. And like with things like the comic books you're mentioning and all sorts of other stuff. And again, a lot of that did happen in Legends as well. And I think that's also been, the video games have done that a lot. The fact that we're getting TV shows that pay a lot more attention to the much smaller characters. All of a sudden we care about like all these different clones and all these different droids and stuff like that. I think that's also really helped it along. Yeah,
and I think like the sort of like the novelizations and all that, like novelizations, comic books, right? Having more characters. And I think there's part of it too where like recognizing a Glup Shitto gives you like a special kind of like fandom feeling. Like you're a big enough fan to know the names of all the bounty hunters kind of thing, right? You're a big enough fan to recognize, right? To recognize this character from one of the novels who's appearing. And I think another reason why Star Wars is kind of perfect for it is because like the background characters aren't just like random humans most of the time. They're really like interesting character designs, even though like I'm pretty sure one of the dudes at like the cantina on Mos Eisley is just like a man in a like Halloween werewolf mask. But even then, the fact that there's like werewolves are now canon in Star Wars, I guess. Everybody just like looks really interesting, which I think helps with like wanting to recognize them and wanting to like know what their name is and what their little paragraph backstory is.
I think you're right. And I like what you say about that special feeling because I think it's a combination of things of like it's kind of cool to know, but also the idea is kind of that like, to me, it's sort of fighting against though the idea of everybody has to know all this information. Because the point is, if you know about your Glup Shitto, like who cares if you don't know anything about anyone else's? Because then you get to tell people about it. Then they get to tell you about it. And it, like any part of any fandom, I'm sure there are Glup Shitto conversations that get very exclusionary.
Oh,
but I think for the
undoubtedly.
I think a big part of why it took off was that it was very much not that. It was very much hey, it's okay if you don't know all the bounty hunters. If there's that one that you really love, if there's this one Ewok you really love, like come and celebrate that.
Yeah. And
I just have to interject. The Cantina werewolf character of course, has a name. It is Locke Sivrock.
And hold on, what is his species here?
Schistavenin.
Schistavenin from Univa Prime. There you go. There's all the things about the dude wearing a literal werewolf mask in the background of the cantina scene. And I'm sure people were like screaming that at their, I don't know, radio? What do you listen to podcasts on these days? Phone? Because they're like, they love Locke Sivrock or something like that. I don't know. It's neat. It's wild. Yeah.
I mean, one thing I think is great about it is that, you know, I often think of the movie Galaxy Quest, which we talked about on my Superhero Ethics podcast, as one of the best kind of like love letters to fandom. Because one thing it's about is that fans will truly love when you truly love a show like that, part of it is that sometimes you really love the ridiculous parts of it as well. Mm-hmm. And I think one of my favorite Glup Shittos that really gets honored out there, and you all can probably help me out because I don't remember the exact details, but in the movie Empire Strikes Back, when people are fleeing from Bespin, there's a famous scene that you have to like stop motion it to see, where someone is basically running through the halls of Bespin carrying like a pancake maker or something. Like it's some like ridiculous piece.
Yeah.
Like I thought it was a toaster, but I just looked it up and it's not that. I can't remember the exact piece of machinery it is. But now, like, if you go to a Star Wars convention, there will be like the running of these guys where like 50 people of all genders will run through the halls all carrying this thing, you know?
What?
And it's based on...
It looks like a humidifier.
That's right.
Yeah, I think it may well be that, like an air heater or something like that. A humidifier actually probably is. And it's, you know, it's a moment of bad set design, of like prop usage that was like, it'll be on screen for half a second, they'll be watching in a dark theater, they won't get to watch it again for years, no one will notice. That now on the internet we can capture it
4K,
and it's ridiculous, but we can love it.
And the creators of new Star Wars stuff try to put things like that into their properties. I think that item actually shows up in one of the new shows somewhere, just in the background, like as part of a pile of junk. And it's a moment, it's there so that fans can do the Leonardo DiCaprio point at the TV and go, that's the thing!
And I think that's one of the most beautiful parts of it is that, like I said, those people at the conventions, a lot of the Glup Shitto love isn't just, you know, people say they love it and talk about it. It's that people will cosplay as it. People will make fan art. People write fan fictions. Many of the sort that we can't discuss in a family-friendly podcast like this one. People will make like just all this crazy fan art and cosplays and all this stuff of these characters. And I think that's, to me, when I'm at cons like that, I just love going up to people and be like, okay, clearly you're Star Wars, but, you know, generally, like, some people will be like, yeah, I'm just kind of a generic TIE fighter pilot. But some will be like, no, I'm TK S261, who appeared in this episode of this comic book and said this one cool line to Darth Vader, and I've always loved the character ever since. You know, that is literally an interaction I had with someone at I think it was Gen Con last year. You know, there's always stuff like this.
That's awesome. Yeah, I mean, I think my favorite Glup Shitto is R5D4, who's the red droid that Luke almost buys, and then R2D2 maybe explodes with his mind, who's to say. And I have like a weird... There's a ceramicist I follow, his name's Herspink Ceramics, and he makes Star Wars-inspired dinnerware. Nice. Really cool. So he came out with an R5D4 inspired cup because R5D4 is back again in The Mandalorian as Amy Sedaris. Like he's on Amy Sedaris' droid operation. So it was like, hey, this is like a really fun character. But he dyslexiated it, which like me too. And called him like R4D5. And so I like got in the comments. I was just like, oh my gosh, this is like, like this is my favorite droid too. Super duper love it. I think you flip flop the numbers, but like so glad to see this. And he was like super chill about it, and like was like, thanks for catching that before I produced an entire line with typos on it. But then there were like so many replies to my comment that were just like, yeah, I was gonna say that too, and like, yeah, how could you not know the name of the droid, blah blah blah, and like. That was really disappointing to see, especially because like you're no longer saying it as like an honest like effort of like an honest attempt to help someone. You're saying it is like the sort of gatekeeping part of the Glup Shittos narrative, right? Like how can you claim to love Star Wars? Name all the droids, kind of thing. And I think like that is an aspect of it too. Like so there's like an exclusionary part of it of like I don't know.
No, I hear what you're saying. We touched on this before, but I want to kind of reemphasize it. To me, I think Glup Shittoness like is a real attempt to interject positivity back. Because yes, the exclusionariness will come in always, and you will get those people, but so much of the conversation I see about it is really with love. And, it's very hard to kind of say, like, socially and societally, like, why did something happen at a particular time? But, Riki, I hadn't realized till you said it that it was so recently, but 2020, I mean, that's the height of when everyone is still yelling at each other about Last Jedi and Rise of Skywalker and, all of this. Like, I think there still is a lot of Star Wars negativity, obviously, out there. But as someone who spends, like, so much of my time in those fandoms, there's been a very concerted effort to sort of stop engaging with the haters and talk about critiques, but really try to find the positivity again. And I do think the Glup Shittos, movement, as we can call it that, idea has been a big part of that. And I think I would say a big part of why people were so happy about it was a way to have really happy conversations without it being, oh my God, but Holdo shouldn't have done that, or about, any of that nonsense.
It's also height of the pandemic.
Yeah,
right?
That's also.
And I think that plays into this as well, where people maybe just like hadn't talked to other people in a long time. And the ability to connect over your love of Star Wars in this ridiculous way was very meaningful. And to have that conversation of like, oh yeah, like I love this character, like I don't even know their name, like, because I mean some characters don't have names, I think. Maybe.
Especially because we weren't connecting with anyone, but also a lot of us were watching things all the time. So it was a chance to be like, okay, I've seen this movie 10 times. Let me pay attention. Oh, wait, who's that guy in the background? And then post it online and someone else can say, oh, if you like that, check out Clone Wars Season 4, Episode 22. You'll see them again. One thing I love is that there's these databases out there where you can just type in a Glup Shitto and it'll say like, okay, this person shows up in Episode 4 of this comic book and Chapter 22 of this novel, and you can just find like the Glup Shitto connections.
Yeah.
That's awesome.
I believe that there's a comic book for R5D4 where I don't know if it's canon or legends or even just fan made, but basically the droid has access to the Force, and in that famous scene with R2D2, like self-sacrifices using the Force, knowing that R2 has the plans for the Death Star because they like talked on the Sandcrawler, and it's like, you need to go with Luke. So I'm just going to use the Force and blow myself up so that they pick you instead.
So I don't know if there's actually two different versions of this out there, or if this is kind of just how it's gotten retold. But in the book, there's now a series of books called From a Certain Point of View, and then there's one of them for each movie. And the one for A New Hope has, I think, the story that you may be talking about, and it is canon. And that one is not that he uses the Force, but that R2 says to him, like, look, I really need to get picked. Is there anything you can do? And that kind of like R2 making noise as R5 is starting to roll away is R2 saying, please, like the fate of all of us rests on this. And it's a heartbreaking little story because you've seen how long R5 has been in that crawler with the Jawas, and he's so lonely and he's so sad, but he's still willing to kind of like, he makes his compressor overheat so that R2 can get picked. And it's just, like just tiny little moment. And it's so beautiful.
And then he's all good. He comes back. He's fine.
Yeah. Like R5, I want us to talk about some of our favorite Glup Shittos, but I want to do one other big question first, and we kind of touched on it with the Boba Fett thing, is, well, let's kind of really dive deeper into how exactly is a Glup Shitto defined? Like, how obscure do they have to be? How well known do they have to be? And then the second question is, can someone stop being a Glup Shitto?
Gosh. So I think that Boba Fett does not count anymore. He's got his own TV show.
But in 1980.
So let's do that first definition first. So where's the line of how obscure you have to be?
I would say, like, not listed in the credits of the movie as, like, well, right?
I disagree.
Okay.
Mhm.
Like, I think even in the original trilogy, I think Boba Fett is a Glup Shitto. Like, he has,
Sure,
like,
yeah.
4 lines and, like,
Yep.
kind of goes out like a chump. But this fandom developed around the character because it's like, oh, but he's supposed to be this amazing bounty hunter. And then, like, some years down the line, like I said, that led to, like, a comic book series, like, lots of
Right.
novels as well. And I think that's kind of the ethos of this, is that this character who's, like, not even close to a main character in the original trilogy is beloved by fans to the point where they demand that we get more of the character.
Right.
And I feel similarly about Wedge. Wedge has, like, less than 10 lines, probably, is named, but, has the whole the X-Wing Rogue Squadron book novel series in the video games for the same thing. And so, like, those two are kind of my go-to examples of, they started off, in my opinion, as Glup Shittos. And then fans love them so much that they have now become regular characters.
Okay, yeah, I mean, that's what I was saying.
Okay.
Okay.
So to give another example then, as someone who is a fun character, appears a good deal, but is never a main character, is Hondo Ohnaka a Glup Shitto?
I don't think so. I think he's too, like, prominent, I guess. I mean, he has a prominent presence at Disneyland, which I know is, like, a weird bar that I keep going to. He's also one of the main characters in the Sims 4 Star Wars game.
Oh my.
Yeah, as, like, the leader of the pirate, like,
That's
not
awesome.
good, not evil group. Yeah. Like, I think he's too, like, he's just a side character. And I don't think that a side character is necessarily a Glup Shitto. A Glup Shitto is, like, background
His
character.
first appearance in the Clone Wars was, I believe, him capturing, like, Obi-Wan, Anakin, and Dooku, right?
So what would you think of this definition then? A Glup Shitto, you can't be a Glup Shitto if you have an influence on the plot. Like, if your character could be replaced by anyone generic, then that could be a Glup Shitto. But if like like, to which I think Wedge would count. Wedge is the person who's with Luke for those fights, but, like, he doesn't do anything that's particularly significant. Whereas, like you said, Hondo's actions cause the plot to move forward. Max Rebo's don't. That one droid standing next to Boba Fett's don't. Would that be, well, because then maybe Boba Fett wouldn't count, because he certainly takes actions that are...
Excuse me,
I
but
guess
Wedge fires a torpedo.
Okay. Also, like, I think I get what they're going for, right? Like, could you replace this character with a dude wearing a werewolf Halloween mask, and would we notice? I think that's a perfectly fine definition. I also don't think that, like, we need a hard and fast.
No.
Like, if it feels like a Glup Shitto in your heart,
Right.
it can be your Glup Shitto.
Right.
Right?
So then... Go ahead.
I was going to say, like, the werewolf character probably has had an action figure back in the day,
Sure.
right?
Oh, sure. Absolutely.
But I don't believe that there are people clamoring for this character to reappear in Star Wars, unfortunately. If you are, write in.
Yeah, but like
Max Rebo, when Max Rebo showed up in Boba Fett, some people lost their minds.
You lost your mind.
I also lost my mind.
Especially because, like, what happens to him? Oh my goodness.
Oh, yeah. He might be
Also,
dead.
I've remembered now, I'm going to Google it to make sure, but yes, I've Googled it and found out that I am correct. It was an ice cream maker that he was carrying on Empire Strikes Back.
Nice.
That's wild. That's awesome.
And his character is known as Milrow Hood.
All right.
What the heck?
Yeah. It's
Oh,
not
no,
even
I've seen
like
that. I've seen that name.
stormtrooper that bonks his head, right? Like, he's got a full-on name. That's awesome.
And I like that definition, though, because first of all, I think you're right, that once we start setting hard and fast rules for Glup Shittos, then we kind of defeated the purpose. I think, though, that part of that idea is just if it's someone who isn't well known, and I think one of the other things that I think is interesting is that, and in talking to people and looking through this, a lot of the Glup Shittos I saw were people who either aren't originally from, either have never appeared on screen, or didn't start on screen. You know, people who come from, I think, the parts of the fandom that are a lot less seen. The books, the novels, the comic books. A lot of these things actually got spelled out in the early role-playing books. I don't know if you guys remember this, but there was a role-playing game that I played in the early 90s when I was in high school. And that had, like, a lot of the, you know, all these characters got their own page and their stats and all this kind of stuff.
I think it's still being published.
West End Games.
Yeah. I think there's been, like, 4 different versions of it by now. But yeah, it's probably something like that. So, yeah, to me, that's another, like, good place for Glup Shittos to come from.
Totally, yeah. So, and that's another thing where you have to, like, name them and then give them stats, too, right? Which helps flesh out this otherwise background character. Yeah.
Yeah. So then that's the last part of it is, can somebody stop being a Glup Shitto? Like, is Boba Fett... If Boba Fett was ever a Glup Shitto, is he still?
I agree with the premise that he once was a Glup Shitto, but then I think he became too beloved and transcended his Glup Shitto status into just straight up main character. Dumb.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, arguably, if they bring a character back, like at that point, they transcend that, right?
But I mean, like, you can bring a character back as like a fun nod in the background, right? Like the two Cantina dudes who show up in Rogue One.
Oh, yeah.
Right?
Dr. What's his face?
Bunsen Honeydew and Beaker? What?
But,
no?
like I would say Wedge is still on the edge in that, no pun intended. Wedge did just show up for like half a second at the end of Rise of Skywalker, but then he's also become a major character in many of the novels.
And he's in Rebels too, right?
Yeah, he has a couple of appearances in Rebels young. So yeah, like he's kind of on that young edge. It's funny because I don't think this comparison has actually happened, but it's in the back of my head. The whole time we're talking about this, what I'm reminded of is every time a band becomes really popular, you get those people who come out of the woodwork who are like, oh yeah, I own their first album. Like, I knew them back in the day.
I saw them in a bar, blah, blah, blah. Yeah.
You know, and I don't want that to be like, oh yeah, that character. Well, I was a Glup Shitto fan of them back in the day. So far, though, I haven't really seen that. You know, like, I think it's been, as I said, it like any part of fandom, it's going to get the shitty, even I'm doing this now, it's going to get the not great people.
Yeah.
But I think for the most part, like Glup Shitto conversations, it just seems to be, if you're there to bring negativity, it's not the conversation you go into.
That's totally fair. And I guess, like, I do have, like, I don't engage as much on, like, I'm on Instagram full stop, right? Like, that's kind of where I social media. So I'm not on, like, Tumblr or, like, TikTok or anything like that engaging in these conversations. But and I also have this, like, fear of just, like, being female presenting and correcting people about Star Wars is, like, not...
That's fair.
Not a thing that's usually goes well. But, you know, I'm happy to hear that most of these conversations are less like, oh, I know this much more, and more like, oh, you don't know this? Come, let me share it with you.
And I'd say it's a good thing for all of us to work on. You know, like when listening to you, listening to other fans, Danielle, written Star Wars, one thing I've started really making a point of doing is looking for when people who seem to be female presenting in comments or TikTok to like speak up and start to get attacked and seeing where can I jump in. But the other thing is, and I think this is just as important, is just I and Riki, and you and I talking about this has also helped me with this, trying not to, like, when the people do bring the negativity, just ignoring them. Like, has just really done a lot to, like, yeah, sometimes you'll see that comment, and just, the more people just skip past, like, to me, the comment sections that I've learned to fear is where someone makes a point, and, like, 8 people say positive things, and maybe they get 1 response, and there's one person who's like, oh, but what about Holdo, blah, 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 and it's got 100 responses, and it's just like, we can do better than this. Yeah,
and, like, even if those responses are like, you're wrong, that's a mean thing to say, like, it's still engaging and, like, pushing it up into, the more popular section. I don't know, right? Like, generating engagement, is that what it's called, or something like that?
Yeah, and I still do it sometimes. Sometimes I think it's still a worthy fight, but I think it's a lot less than I used to think it was, and I think it's true for a lot of us. All right, any last comments on that, or should we just get into the most fun part?
I want to hear people's Glup Shittos unless you have anything.
Well, before people start writing in, Dr. Cornelius Evasion, I had to look that one up, is the I don't like you either guy in the cantina who shows up in Rogue One.
Good. What's his friend's name?
It's like Ponda Baba or something like that.
Not even look it up.
No.
What kind of fan are you?
Yeah.
Yeah. They were definitely Glup Shittos.
So-
they did show up again in Rogue One, but I think they qualify.
I think they still are, right? Like the humidifier showing, or the ice cream machine, right? Showing up in other contexts is like the writers or like costume set designers or whatever saying like they're on the Glup Shitto too. I don't think that makes them more than that.
So, Matthew, you talked about Wedge. And I'm just like stuck on this idea because Wedge had a glorious Legends career in the novels.
That's
right. And so, should we include the books? Should we include comic books? Right, like Dr. Afara is a super popular comic book character,
right?
And so, like, I don't think she could ever be a Glup Shitto.
Yeah.
Grand Admiral Thrawn, right? Like, got his start in the novels, and then now has been in Rebels and is going to be on Ahsoka. So I think you have to include all this media, even though naturally fewer people are going to know about them from not movies.
Yeah, it's hard. I mean, I definitely agree. I also think it's important to talk about, like, so, like, for example, if, Dr. Aphra does appear for 2 minutes in an upcoming episode of something, for people who've never seen any of her books, can she be there, Glup Shitto? Like, I guess to me, maybe Glup Shitto-ness is in the eye of the beholder a little bit. And like, and I guess that would be, to me, the Glup Shitto attitude should be if someone says, oh my god, this Dr. Aphra character is my new Glup Shitto, I love them. I would hope the response is, that's awesome. You should know, actually, there's tons of material about them. Come check it out.
Oh, yeah.
And not, oh, you're not a real fan if you think they're a Glup Shitto, because here's all the stuff they have. Like, does that make sense?
No.
Like,
yeah.
I think there's also like a way to engage that being like, oh, guess what, fam? They're not a Glup Shitto. Merry Christmas. Here's all your fun content.
Mm-hmm.
Like, so like, in that way, like, oh, don't worry, they're not a Glup Shitto. I know you just said that they're your favorite, but they don't have to stay in that realm. Here's all the content that stars them. Hooray for you.
Yeah, and now there's so much stuff that you can do that.
I guess I feel like if I was a new fan coming into it, like you said, like I wanted that moment, and I'd be like, oh, I just saw this. Okay, this is one I can have, Sure. And I would hate to take that away from someone by saying, no, it's not a Glup Shitto, but I guess I'm sort of like, a Glup Shitto, like I said, it's in the eye of the beholder, but
sure.
I think you're probably right. That's also, as long as it's done with positivity, that's just as good a way to do it.
Yeah, and I think, like, if you want it to be a Glup Shitto, if you think Boba Fett is a Glup Shitto, good for you. Mm-hmm. And I mean that non-sarcastically. I don't think this needs a hard and fast definition in any way. Yeah.
Yep.
And that's, because I loved Cobb Vanth in The Mandalorian and Book of Boba Fett. Part of it is that, like, I really like Timothy Olyphant, but I know, Matthew, you've mentioned that Cobb Vanth is in the Aftermath novels.
Yes.
And I didn't like the first one, but it's like, oh, but if I want more Cobb Vanth, maybe I do need to finish that series. And so that's the kind of thing, like, I think it's exciting to engage with fandom and to find out that there is more out there. And that's what the conversation should be about.
Let's engage with fandom. Let's engage with other people's Glup Shittos.
Exactly.
Yeah, let's go.
All right. So some of the ones that I saw online, first of all, Greedo was mentioned by a number of people,
Greedo's
which
great.
I loved.
Love Greedo,
I very much as you're talking about, for whatever reason, like, my grandmother who knew nothing about Star Wars, like, probably just walked in and found the first one off the shelf. I had a Greedo toy when I was like 6 years old, so I just loved the character.
Greedo's great, right? That awesome interaction with Han Solo. It spawns the whole, like, who shot first, Han versus Greedo situation. Also, like, Greedo's color scheme is, like, really bold and, like, iconic. He's got, like, a really cool look. He doesn't speak English. You gotta read some subtitles in Star Wars. Yeah. Love Greedo. Excellent Glup Shitto.
Another one of my favorites was Gascano, who I had to look up. Gascano he's one of the pod racers in Phantom Menace. Oh. He's one of the ones who has, like, all these weird limbs coming out, and he's the only one other than Anakin to finish the race.
Nice.
Towards the end of the race, he's in the kind of three-way thing with Syndulla and Anakin, and he's kind of just hanging back while him and Anakin are fighting. And then when Sebulba gets knocked out, this other guy was one of the other ones to finish. That was not one I had ever put together what the guy's name was. His name is said by the announcer. I think it's the last one said by the announcer before Joe Bahat starts the race.
Sorry. I haven't seen Phantom Menace since I was a child. Is Hera in Phantom Menace?
No. They meant Sebulba.
I meant Sebulba. I
got so excited. Okay.
No, sorry. Yeah. But yeah, so that was a really cool one, I thought, which was nice also because I admit I don't have generally very positive feelings about the pod race, so I'm glad that that can inspire some cool things. Certainly, I think another one, and I didn't really realize this until Riki, we talked about it during the Mandalorian episodes, but who's the woman who is a crack shot in the pod races? Or a Sing, yeah. And then she went on to become a character in some other stuff, so that was awesome.
Aura Singh.
Yeah, she just stood there and looked cool, right?
Standing on top of a hill during the pod race scene. In the background. Maybe they zoom in a little bit on her, but not super much. But then she goes on to be a recurring character in the Clone Wars cartoon, and then gets name dropped in Solo.
Yeah.
I don't know if you remember that. But their Lando is talking with what's his face?
Oh yeah, I do, with Giles. Not Giles, but that's the same actor, Anthony Stewart Head.
Yeah. But they're like, oh, you're the one that killed Aura Singh. Thanks for doing that. I owed her money or something like that.
Another one that Riki, I'm hoping you can tell us about because I believe they're from Legends and quite favorite. Dash Rendar.
Oh, well, Dash Rendar. Let me push up my glasses.
He made a face that he was so worried, Matthew, and you said, oh, maybe you'll know. And then as soon as you said it, I'm so excited. Dash Rendar.
I hope I'm right. But Dash Rendar is from Shadows of the Empire, which was I believe a novel crossover with a video game.
Okay.
And this takes place between Empire Strikes Back and Return of the Jedi, and he is the Han Solo stand-in during this period. Because he has a ship that is also a modified Corellian freighter, YT, I think it's 2400.
Ooh.
Random brain stuff.
Good model.
And you get to fly this ship in the video game. It's a fun video game. Probably a little dated. I think it was N64.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I knew nothing about him, but a number of people mentioned him.
At the end of that story, I believe he doesn't join the rebellion. So it's also kind of like a what if of what if Han Solo didn't join the rebellion? He's along for a little bit of the ride, but at the end he's I don't want in on this.
I like that. Couple others that were mentioned. Where would I have it? One other that, again, I had no knowledge of, but George Cardass. I believe he's in the newer set of books.
George? What?
So it's spelled...
George Kardashian.
I don't know. It's spelled Georj.
Okay.
Then space. So that's the first name. Last name Car-Das.
Okay.
Cardass. That sounds so familiar.
I hope it's pronounced George or something like that, because it could just be one of those, his actual name is George, they just spell it weird.
Yeah.
But according to Wikipedia, StarWarsFandom.com, he was a human male from Corellia who lived during the time of the Galactic Republic, the Empire, and the New Republic. Early in his life, he joined the crew of the smuggling ship Bargain Hunter, working mainly as a bootlegger for the Hutts. And he's mentioned in the Thrawn books, so that's where he becomes important. He's, I believe, one of the people on a ship that kind of wanders into Chiss space.
Neat.
So yeah.
The Bargain Hunter is a great name for a bounty ring. That's great, yeah.
One other one I wanted to mention that I thought was really interesting, especially because it kind of it highlights a theme that I think we haven't talked much about with the Glup Shittos, but I think is important, is representation.
Mm-hmm.
I think a lot of times a character becomes a Glup Shitto because, either they actually are, early on, oh, hey, look, there's a woman who's, fighting in this group, or, hey, there's, someone Latino who's in this group, or whatever. But then also, characters who are, that they're clearly metaphors for things, and they often become very popular, especially in those communities. And the High Republic has really generated a ton of this, in part because the queer representation has been so good on so many levels. And there's Phase 1 and Phase 2 of the High Republic. In Phase 1, we meet they're kind of like the Ghost crew crossed with Talon Card's crew from the original Thrawn books, in that it's like a fun crew of misfits and ne'er-do-wells trying to make good, but they're not as actively part of the rebellion as the Ghost crew is, but they wind up like being like transport for a lot of our heroes, and so helping out a lot. And the captain is a guy named Leox Gyasi. I think I'm pronouncing that right. Leoxgyasi. And, dating, like, he kind of is a mentor figure to one of the more main characters, and she's talking about kind of some romantic trouble she's having. And there's been kind of some speculation about, like, who is he into? And he kind of just talks about how he's never really been into anyone because he just doesn't feel that way. And the word asexual is never used, but apparently the writer had, like, worked with, like, some of the asexual advocacy organizations to help craft this character, and he's just this beautiful representation of an asexual character in Star Wars, because it's a huge galaxy, and so all of these things would exist out there. And so he was very much a Glup Shitto of mine, and I think of a lot of other people's, but also I think just mentioning him is a good way of bringing up that, like, there have been, there are, just characters who love people of their same gender, they're pan characters, and then there are characters who, come from races that have 3 genders, or that have, characters that, like, switch gender during the course of their lifetimes, or who are, who have immigrant type experiences, or, any of these kind of things. And I think that's just one more awesome part of Glup Shittos, when it can be like, hey, I'm latching on. It in some ways it's kind of bad when it's like the only representation you can find is the Glup Shitto out there, but still it can be kind of awesome too.
Yeah, that's what I was about to dig into, I guess, just to be negative. For no reason.
No, but it's a thing.
No, but like because there's a set of characters in Star Wars Rebellion, which is a beautifully animated, terrible show. The animation is so gorgeous, but it's such a bad show. But there's 2 characters. Oh gosh, I forget their names. They're voiced by Bobby Moynihan and the guy who played the principal in Community.
I know who you're talking about.
And they're a couple, and they're like canonically a couple, and they talk about like being married to each other, and they're both male, or like male presenting. They're both aliens, right? So we don't even get like a homosexual human couple. But yeah, like having 2 named characters whose names I'm blanking on right now, and like, but having them be the only like real gay representation that we're kind of like officially getting in Star Wars is in this like buried in this kind of bad animated show that they don't have to like.
We have had tons and tons in, again, the novels and things like that. But you're right, it's on screen. It has still been fairly bad. Yeah. Although I will say in Andor, we got a lesbian couple.
And there was like one kiss at the end of Rise of Skywalker, I think, but it's all in like easily cuttable sections, right?
Yeah, I mean, I think the gay representation in Andor was much more upfront, but yes, in other things till then it had been pretty small.
But yeah, I do think it's cool that there's like little, I don't know, like pet projects, or like characters that you can find, and like I think because there's so little known about them, you can put so much of yourself into them, or like so much of what you want them to be.
And also, if we're talking about the trajectory of, for example, Boba Fett going from Glup Shitto to beloved in fandom and now like a real main character in Star Wars, maybe that points to the possibility in the future that fandom will carry the torch for some of these characters, and then we will get their story, or we will get a better representation of the story in the future. Like, maybe that's a hope that we can have.
A new hope? Sorry.
I mean, I think Thrawn was that. The fact that Thrawn showed up in... Thrawn was probably a bit too big in Legends to be thought of as Glup Shitto today, but I think in some ways he was, because, again, he was from Legends, and most of the fandom didn't know much about that. But he was so beloved that they wound up bringing him back into the Disney canon.
Yeah, and I think when Disney bought Star Wars and declared, all those novels to be legends and that they were going to create their new canon, a lot of people despaired that Thrawn was lost, and then to bring him back in this way, it was special to a lot of people.
Yeah, definitely. So what about you all? Who are some of your Glup Shittos?
I mean, I already mentioned R5D4. Droids for Life.
I mean, my number one, which I have zero hope that there will ever be any kind of story about,
Get a vacuum.
and that's it points to like the ridiculousness of George Lucas even giving this character a name, but it is the you want to buy some Death Sticks character from Attack of the Clone, Elon Sleaze Bogano. Just because, like, the name.
I will go to the hill I will die on is that he is a victim of unethical mind control. But go on.
Well, the fact that George bothered to give that character a name for like the one like 20-second scene, and it's such an amazing name for this character.
Yeah, like it feels like it wasn't too much of a bother to get to Sleaze Bogano, right? Like that feels like something you're like, we'll change it later, and then it just like never
got changed. And that's fair, and that's probably why we won't ever get the story. Although I think again, like somewhere something has been written about like how this character Elon did go home and did stop selling Death Sticks and rethink his life.
Oh, and then couldn't afford to pay rent because he no longer had an income, and then his family starved. Thanks, Obi-Wan. Yeah. Also,
and wait, who's the other? I think because it's not just Death Stick guy, but there was another one, right?
I mean, I have lots. I don't know.
Well, I made a joke about a vacuum because I thought that when you eat some bread and there's some stuff that gets on the floor.
What?
I don't know what this is referencing. I mean, I love gonk droids.
I thought Salacious Crumb was one of your favorites.
Oh, sure. Salacious Crumb is everyone's favorite.
Yeah,
though, right?
I don't know. Okay, yeah. So here we go.
I do point every time there's one of those monkeys on the screen.
A coaxian monkey something? What is it? Squirrel monkey? That's not what they're called. Coaxian is a part of it, right?
No, coaxian is an energy source.
Gosh darn it.
Mm-hmm. So I'll say one of my favorites. I've already mentioned the pilot. I have a couple of others I've mentioned in a few different places now because I've asked the question of a few people. But there's a couple that I actually ship really hard. It's one of my favorite couples in Star Wars. And it is two characters who we only get a couple episodes with, but they do keep popping up in various places. And it is Zero the Hutt and Cy Snoodles.
Yes! Yes!
Cy Snoodles.
Heck yes.
Zero the Hutt you probably haven't seen unless you've seen the Clone Wars. But Cy Snoodles is the singer for the band in Jabba the Hutt's palace. The one who, like, she has, like...
The long legs.
She has long legs and it's like big like a head. And then her lips are like on a stalk, like a foot away from her body. And Zero the Hutt is like, he's another Hutt who's kind of like, the younger cousin who gets initiated into the crime family but doesn't really know what he's doing. And they just took the story and ran with it. And in the Clone Wars, it's basically like a 1920s guys and dolls gangster love story. Where she's the long-suffering Maul who loves him and will stand by him, but might betray him to make sure that she comes out on top, and he's trying to, like, save up enough to run away with her, but he gets into trouble, and maybe he's abandoned her, and it's just this, like, wonderful love story of the two of them. They're both kind of terrible people. They're trying to make their way in the world, and they both have terrible 1920s Chicago accents, and I just absolutely love everything about the two of them.
I think Zero's got more of like a southern gentleman kind of accent, right?
Yeah, he lives in a swamp.
In this very like scared young boy kind of a way.
Oh, sure. Yeah, he definitely is like the gloves full of Vaseline guy from Of Mice and Men. But yeah, I also love Cy Snoodles. Okay, is Cy Snoodles in? She's only in the remaster, like where every digital effect is added. Right?
No.
No, she's in the original.
Yeah.
Oh,
yeah.
Cool. Okay.
But it's just a puppet.
Okay. Because I have a weird digital rendering of her in my mind.
Yes.
Okay.
There it is.
Also, Salacious Crumb is a Kowakian monkey lizard, so it was very close.
Okay.
But yeah, I love Cy Snoodles. I love her in Clone Wars. I think we talked about this in our Clone Wars episode. But I loved it. Like, this is okay. This is a weird sentence, but go with me. I love how sexy she is because she's not. Like, she's a creepy looking alien. You've already mentioned lips on stalk, right? Like, she is.
But you kiss those lips.
Well, like, she's just, like, the way that she holds herself is very, like, femme fatale the entire way. She's a club singer. She's got the slinky dress on. She's got legs for days. But, like, the way that she interacts with other characters is in a very, like, I know I'm extremely attractive, flirtatious kind of way. And I just think that that's, like, it's really fun to see a character who is, like, in no way, shape, or form abiding by any of our ideas, our cultural, like, norms of what is sexy, right? Like, she's going against all these cultural standards, but is still, like, so obviously coded as sexy and, like, knows that she's sexy too. Yeah. I think that's so cool.
It's the combination of the confidence, which is just, you know, the idea that anybody can be sexy if they know they're sexy and walk into the room claiming that, but also that idea of, in a galaxy full of lots and lots of species, the very specific human ideals of what is sexy. You know, there are going to be people who are like, humans, they walk upright on two legs. That's hideous. Like, you know? Like,
like, Hutts probably think humans look disgusting and weird, right?
Yeah.
Like why wouldn't they?
To someone else. So, I love that. All right, anything else on the Glup Shittos of the world before we get into some of the feedback that we've gotten?
I got one more. And I don't even think this character is named. Like, actually has a name. But the original Red 5.
Ooh, Red 5 stands
in Rogue One. Right? Because that was a moment in that movie when Red 5 gets shot down. I actually cheered because that's Luke's call sign in A New Hope. So it's like, of course Red 5 has to go down, like, so that Luke can take that call sign. But now I'm kind of like, who was that?
Yeah.
What's their story? And that's the beauty of Star Wars.
I remember in Rogue One this happened, and I think that may have been, when did Rogue One come out? Because I wonder if this was also part of kind of what started it.
Like 2017-ish?
2016. So, okay, a couple years before the whole... But, like, one of the things that Rogue One did is it brought back to life a lot of those pilots who were in the Red and Gold squadrons, as well as giving us a couple other squadrons. And some others who I saw on the Glup Shitto lists and I looked at, not necessarily feedback I got, but like when I looked on like Reddit lists and people saying about it, were almost every one of those other pilots. Because almost all the pilots had a tagline. You know, one of them says, you know, like, stay on target. Stay on target. Another's like, there's too many of them. I can't hold them. Like,
it came from them behind.
Yes.
Yeah, they're all ridiculous and almost all overacted, but they're so much fun and they're just so memorable. And almost everyone, every one of them had someone who loved them, and people were talking about like, oh, it was so great to see them in Rogue One. It was so great to see them in Rebels. You know, that kind of a thing. So we'll talk a little bit more about Glup Shittos in other fandoms in the Patreon section. But for now, I want to close out. Like I said, we've been trying to do more feedback. And there's some feedback I didn't want to do with Paul because it's specific to our Hayashi friends. So I want to do a couple of those. We did get a couple more, by the way. Riki specifically thanking you for your opinions on the strike episode and all that. A lot more people supporting us and what we're doing. And then I guess kind of off to a start because she just got started listening, I understand, but has now written in twice. Mandy T. Rebel, who said that she found us when looking for stuff at Andor. She writes, came for Andor, stayed for Rebels. I really love your coverage, especially Sarah.
Aww.
You always seem to know what I'm thinking about an episode, and I love your humor. Thank you, Sarah, and to all of you.
Yay! Thanks, Mandy. That's great. One of my students in ceramics was like, you're really funny, but I don't think you know you're funny. And I'm like, I'm trying to be. It's just really awkward and weird. So I love that Mandy gets the funny but not funny awkward humor. I appreciate it.
Yay.
And then Simon wrote in, I've got a Rebels question that I'd love to hear you three dig into. We've seen what a good job Kanan has done with Ezra, especially helping him work through his emotions and things, especially about his parents. What do you think would have happened if Kanan was Anakin's mentor? Love your show, Simon.
Ooh.
Right?
Ooh. Yeah, I mean, I think that's like a whole nature v nurture debate. Because, like, I mean, Anakin is a moody kid. And we've talked about, like, what would have happened if Qui-Gon was Anakin's mentor.
Yeah.
And I think Kanan kind of aligns more with that, like, Qui-Gon side of the Force. So So I'm guessing, like, oh gosh, I don't know, right? Because, like, timeline shifting weird. Part of what makes Kanan so, like, uniquely set is that he didn't actually become a Jedi Knight. He only got a little bit of his Padawan training before Order 66 happened, right? So, like, if he was a Jedi back then, he would have gone through the whole training. Maybe he wouldn't have this, like, softness in his approach. But I think similar to, like, if Qui-Gon had stayed Anakin's mentor, that I don't think we would have gotten the Darth Vadering that we did.
Yeah, I mean, it's hard to mix timelines like that because so much of what defines Kanan as a character was Order 66.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
Was losing the Jedi Order, losing his master. But the one thing that I hit upon is that Kanan is a Jedi in a relationship with Hera. Like, he loves, and he allows himself to love. So I would like focus in on that, and I could see, like, if somehow you can, like, merge the timelines and whatever, that in Attack of the Clones, where there's that awkward flirting between Anakin and Padme, and, like, Obi-Wan is the stern master, right? And so Anakin has to kind of, like, sneak around Obi-Wan. If Kanan's the master there, he probably, like, gives him the little elbow nudge, and, like, puts him in a situation where, like, hey, why don't you and, like, Padme, like, go chat, and I'll talk to Master Yoda over here.
Yeah. I think I'm with you both. Again, it's hard to mix the timelines and, like, you know, but assuming that the same version of Kanan is in that Jedi Temple, I don't know if I can say that Anakin wouldn't have turned, but I think it would have made Palpatine's job much harder. And to me, I think there's kind of two main things that we've kind of talked about, but I want to go into more detail in. One is kind of what you were saying, Riki, but I take it in a little bit different direction, which is that I think Kanan modeled what it means to be a Jedi, but also have attachments. That he was not as afraid of attachments as Yoda would always claim, or Obi-Wan would always claim. And I think that because of that, not only would he have encouraged Anakin and Padme, but that when Anakin started to have these fears about Padme, Kanan would have been someone he could go and talk to. And to me, I think one of the things that I don't love Revenge of the Sith, but one thing I think it does get right is this idea that Anakin feels like Palpatine is the only one who will listen to him, the only one who he can turn to with his feelings. And I think kind of related to that also, and this is I think what Simon is getting at, there are so many scenes where Ezra is kind of lost in his feelings, and Kanan goes and listens to him. And sometimes they argue some, but Kanan listens to him. And I compare that to where Obi-Wan just says, like, you know, be mindful of your feelings. Don't get lost in your feelings. And he doesn't really give Anakin a chance to open up. He just tells him to, like, push it back down. And, you know, I don't blame Obi-Wan. I think, you know, Anakin still made the choices he made, and Palpatine's a groomer and all of that. But I think it's not that I think that it's Obi-Wan's fault as much as I think someone could have done a better job than Obi-Wan. And I think Kanan would have done the things that I think Obi-Wan didn't, that I think could have at least made a real difference. Would it have actually stopped it? Maybe Palpatine would still figured out a way around it. Who knows? But
yeah, I like that. I think Obi-Wan did the best job that Obi-Wan could, but he was not the best person for the job. And especially, like, you mentioning, like, all this talking about Anakin feeling like he could only go to Palpatine with his relationship, right? Because, like, he kind of talked a little bit to Obi-Wan about it with the whole Satine thing. And Obi-Wan was like, yeah, you know, I really, really wish I had a girlfriend, but I don't, so sucks to suck. Yeah. And that's kind of his advice, was like, shut it down, which isn't what Anakin wanted to hear, right? Like, he just needed to express his feelings and not just be told to, like, be stoic and cram them down inside until they explode in a fit of child murdering rage. I don't know. Yeah. Totally agree with what you're saying.
Obi-Wan never even really talked about his own feelings about, like, part of it, I think, was Anakin wanted just to connect with Kenobi more, and Kenobi wasn't willing to. And I think, you know, Kanan definitely shares his feelings with Ezra when he's upset about things, and so
now that I'm thinking about this, so Obi-Wan loses Satine, and just like that is the closest he comes to falling to the dark side in that moment in the fight with Maul. And I wonder if, like, the Obi-Wan in the Clone Wars is shown to be more aware and, like, knows that Anakin and Padme are together.
Right. And that's also been confirmed in some of the novels since then.
Yeah. And so I wonder if his own experiences kind of like traumatized him, and that's why he can't talk to Anakin about his relationship with Padme, is that like it hurts so much, and ultimately like he doesn't want Anakin to get hurt in the same way, but that leads to him not even being able to talk about it.
Yeah. I think that's really true, and I think there's a lot of directions that could go. It could be like that's the hurt. It could be that because he regrets not having been with her, that he can't bring himself to stop Anakin. It can be, there's so many, and this is a total tangent, but it was one of my disappointments about the Kenobi show was that her name was never mentioned. Because I thought that in those years when he's coming to terms with Anakin's fall would have been a great time for him to wrestle with that some more. But yeah, either way. Great question, Simon. Thank you so much. To everybody else, please
that was fun to think about.
Yeah. Please keep listener feedback coming in. Of course, you can find all the ways to give us feedback by going to theethicalpanda.com. There you'll find our Twitter, Facebook, all the ways to contact us. There are some big things coming soon, so stay tuned. It shouldn't affect your feed at all, but we are going to be moving to a new podcast network. I mentioned it a while ago, and there's been a lot of delays and stuff like that. It is finally happening. There's going to be no changes. There'll be some changes to the Patreon system. So for the moment, I'm not going to say, you can sign up for Patreon, of course, which is always welcome, but I actually suggest holding off for a moment because we're going to be switching to be the same price and the same thing, but through a different feature instead of Patreon itself. But I will still continue to give 25% of all the proceeds of that to the strike fund as we continue to support the strike. So, Riki and Sarah, is there anything in particular you all want to plug or mention?
No.
Not at this time.
Just my
support
Instagram,
the strike.
Always support the strike. My Instagram, Sarah Hayashi Arch. I keep threatening to make a website to sell things, but as the holiday season looms ever closer, that I'll start putting some stuff up for sale. So
nice.
Support artists, etc.
Yeah, definitely. And of course, please support them. Please support all the other great hosts we have. I always try to, one thing I think I did not get to mention in the last episode, one thing I mentioned in the last episode, but I wanted to repeat, is that, if you're interested in the lightsabers that, my friend Alan, who was on, sells, you can actually go to his website and use the promo code ethicalpanda and you'll get a discount. If you want to buy a lightsaber, make great gifts. They're awesome for yourself. I have one. I love it. Check out the great stuff Sarah's doing and Riki's doing. Check out all the stuff that our guests are doing because I feel so lucky to have such incredible guests. So if you are a Patreon or a member, please stick around. For everyone else, thank you so much. We have spoken.